Hey everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations. So long time no see, yeah? It's been a while since we have created some content, and a much needed break has taken place. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to be looking at the astrology, helping us process and sharing some of my thoughts and ideas with you around the current transits and how we could emotionally and psychologically benefit from the transits that are taking place right now. So I think that we'll just jump into an astrological update. I feel that there is a lot to say on the recent new and full moons that have taken place. We had Mars-Uranus conjunction as well. And of course, we now have the upcoming Venus square to the nodes and the Sun that has recently been making an opposition to Saturn. So what does this all mean? How do we flow with this energy? How do we understand it? That's the kind of scope of what I feel I want to try and grab our attention with today. Okay, so how are you? That's the question. The first one that I want to propose to you is how are you? How have these transits been for you? What has changed for you? I'm just trying to think about my thoughts around this recent Mars-Uranus North Node conjunction. This was and still is a very significant alignment. I'm sure many of you were looking on the internet to listen to different perspectives on how this could materialize. Here's mine. So one of the cool things about Uranus is that it always is in constant contrast to Saturn. In other words, rebellion and conformity, consensus and innovation. Okay, innovation being Uranus, consensus being Saturn. And to understand these archetypes and how they play out in our lives, you've got to really recognize that each and every one of us has a sense of reality. Okay, we build a sense of reality, and based on what stimulates us, what we take in, what we internalize, like the rules of society, the ideals of the parents, the ideals of society, the ways that you've experienced relationships and friendships and such, you build a world of this, and along the road you create psychological and emotional structures, belief structures and such, and you form them. This would be the Saturn component. Okay, and when we interact with life, we're always kind of navigating in this sphere of our sense of where the boundary is on certain things, what we can do, what we can't do, what we like, what we don't like, what our dreams are and such. And when you bring Uranus into the mix, like now being in Taurus, it comes along and it bumps up against these pre-existing structures that we have, this model of reality, this sense of identity that we form. And it pushes against it and says, is this still true for you? Is this still the narrative? Is this still, how you want to live life? And oftentimes the way that we feel that is a friction between a sense of a restriction and a desire to want to maybe to liberate from that, to free ourselves from this, right? So it oftentimes emotionally, internally feels like there's something that is pressuring us to want to break free from it, and on the other side, a pressure to that feels like a stuckness, like, oh, this is boring, or I want to get out of this, or this doesn't mean anything for me, right? We can kind of feel that friction between these two archetypes. And so, as you know, Saturn is sitting in Aquarius. And for those of you that are new to astrology, when I say Saturn square the nodes, what I mean is that Saturn in Aquarius is forming what is called a 90-degree relationship angle, like an angle, okay, 90 degrees to the North and South node that is currently in Taurus and Scorpio. And this square, what it does is it reflects a kind of tension between pre-existing dynamics that feel safe to us and new dynamics that reflect a kind of growth, like the potential for growth, right? The potential for change, the potential for something new. And so with Saturn squaring the nodes, we have a Saturnian component that is pushing the nodal axis, and then you have Uranus on the north node. So you can kind of see where this is going, right? We've got Saturn, which is a big part of Uranus and Uranus's role in activation. And then we have Uranus itself. And so Saturn in Aquarius, squaring the nodes, is kind of revealing to us where we have these emotional patterns of behavior, like what I talked about, psychological dispositions, certain attachments to things, right? Whatever that may be, attachment to a job that's lost its meaning, attachment to a relationship that's lost its meaning, these things. And Uranus is coming along and saying, okay, kiddo, is this still what you want to do? Is this still how you relate to life, to yourself, to your relationship, to your job, to the things that you sense to are valuable or not? Okay? So now that we have a kind of framework for how these archetypes are pushing dynamics internally for us and collectively, what I want you to now do is imagine that there is a line that is starting to curve upwards gradually like this, okay? And eventually it's going to get to a peak experience, and then it's going to start to descend, okay? When we have things like Mars conjunct Uranus on the north node, what we have is a continued build-up until we've reached an exact point, right? So we're this swelling of energy. When Mars Uranus north node conjuncted, we were at the peak experience. And so the energy was really, really, really pushing against you. And in some ways, actually pushing for your freedom, pushing for your liberation. And what that can feel like oftentimes is, again, a sense of wanting to break free, trying something new, a paradigm shift, seeing something in your life from a different point of view, realizations, okay? Things that you're processing internally about your life, the struggles you're dealing with, the challenges you're facing. This peak experience would have really highlighted to you karmic dynamics or emotional dynamics, like I mentioned, that you're processing through, okay? So now that we've come from that peak experience, like a roller coaster, and we're going down like this, what happens is Uranus is also an archetype that accelerates things, okay? Fast, like accelerates it. And so just like the roller coaster picture of coming to the top there and then going down like that, once we've had this peak swell and it pushes us to have these experiences that I just mentioned, then what happens is you can't actually go back, right? You can't go back. And so you've had this paradigm shift, and now all of a sudden your life starts to gain traction in a way where you may no longer decide for yourself that there are certain choices or decisions that you want to make in your life from these old patterns. You may want to begin to nurture or cultivate or integrate certain emotional and psychological dispositions that you have within yourself that you go, okay, yeah, this is what I want to do from now onwards, or I don't want to commit to those things anymore. I don't want to make those choices anymore, as an example. And so if we zoom right out and we observe this whole entire pattern of Saturn square the nodes and Uranus and Saturn, Uranus and Mars and North Node conjunctions that took place, what we have from this more zoomed out perspective is an ongoing pressure and intensity of things building up within you, then experiencing a phase when this was highlighted, this transit was highlighted, of things that needed to change, that wanted to change, that perspective shifts that you had, commitments that you feel like you want to make. And now that energy is echoing, vibrating in the background of your life. And depending on how sensitive you are to these dynamics, you will react to them and respond to them, okay? So what has shifted for you in your life? You can write that in the comment section, right? What has changed for you? So again, if I kind of zoom out, and I'll put the astrology chart up for us, this whole entire recent period of time, these cycles over the last month and a half, have been very critical in a collective shift around certain values that we may have about some things. We've had a collective shift and an ongoing continuation of a collective shift around certain patterns that we want to commit to or not. And if you think about this in a consensus way, like in terms of just how the consensus would react to these astrological events, you can think of the time when America announced that it was in a recession. Okay, this is around about this time. Financial, right? Structure, safety, stability. Here in Europe, for instance, there's an extreme rising of gas prices and electrical prices. Not that it hasn't been, and the same for other parts of the world, but there's definitely a collective theme that is taking place around the archetype of survival, security, stability, safety, these things. But also internally, very slowly, right, shifts in terms of value, right? What do people value, right? What is the thing that we identify in our lives? And so this is becoming this is changing very slowly, but it is also at the same time changing very rapidly. You just don't see it in this way. So this transit, especially the new and full moon, the new moon in Leo, the full moon in Aquarius, all of those two lunar aspects, what they did was they just, again, reinforced the Saturn, sorry, not the Saturn, but the Mars-Uranus conjunction. Okay, they just reinforced that. And now Venus at the moment, and I'm going to go over to the astrology chart so that we can take a look at it. So you're looking at the astrology chart now, and now we have Venus sitting at 6 degrees right there. Okay, and Venus is going to be coming up to an exact square to the nodes. Now, in evolutionary astrology, Venus is associated with Taurus. Okay, so here we have Venus about to make the squares to the nodes, right? And it's also going to then be in a direct opposition to Saturn. We can actually do this, for instance, and make it a lot easier to see. It's not going to be seeing the square right now, okay? But it will square. Let me just clear that for us. It will make an opposition to Saturn, just like the sun has been, and it will square those nodes, okay? When it does this, we're going to see a progressive internalization of these shifts that have taken place when Mars and Uranus conjuncted. Okay, so this Mars energy that's sitting here right on top of the North Node, okay, when that Venus crosses over and hits those nodes, this energy that is here, that's a little bit more in the background, okay, that becomes integrated on a personal level. So you'll start to see, like I said, with that roller coaster, as we're going on the downhill, this Venus is going to essentially reflect the acceleration phase, okay, around these shifts that are taking place for us. And when we go to the shift of the lunar and solar eclipses that will happen roughly October time, when the next set of eclipses come in, we will see in full bloom the effects of these transits that have taken place. Okay, so things like what has internally shifted for you around your sense of value, how do you want to use your time? Okay, that's one dimension. What types of emotional and psychological patterns in you, like trauma, for instance, etc., repressions, things that need to be healed, what came up to the surface for you that allowed you to move on from something or see it from a different perspective. Yeah. And then finally, the thing that I feel is deeply important with Uranus Mars North Node conjunction was, how are you connecting back to your body? Right? How are you connecting back to your body? So how do you feel your sense of movement in your body? Do you feel free and fluid in your body? Do you still feel tension and resistance and stuckness? Do you still need to do some healing around that, right? As an example. Another component to this Mars-Uranus conjunction has to do with your relationship to your skills. What types of skills do you have? Do you invest in yourself? Do you see yourself as an asset that consistently keeps creating abundance for yourself in many ways, like take a piece of paper and write down the type of skills that you have. And I'm not talking about like I'm talking about like life skills, you know. A silly thing, for instance, is, do you know how to do CPR? What happens if you get into a situation and you're one of those people that has that training? You have resources, you offer abundance to a situation, you provide some form of surety in that situation. Think of something else, like, do you know how to grow your own food? It doesn't necessarily say that you have to. I'm saying, look at the things around you in your life and pick a skill, whatever that may be, something as silly as, like I said, like just go buy a plant, for instance, and nurture it for a bit and learn something around nurturing a plant, or grow some potatoes, or grow some tomatoes. And, this is very earthly Taurus themes. The idea here is not so much about the skill itself as much as the continued internalization of value and therefore resource that you carry with you, so that the value of your asset, which is you, right, when it gives back to the world, gives back to its environment, gives back to life in and of itself, not only reinforces a strong sense of stability, but it also, like I said, it feeds, it offers, right? You increase your value structure. And this can, the spectrum of ideas does not have to be specifically to growing something. It could be improving your CV, for instance. Maybe you have a certain type of job, and maybe look at investing in some time in improving a certain skill set that you have that to offer. It opens up your creativity, right? So if I think about this kind of Leo Aquarius axis that's been highly emphasized right now, the capacity for creativity and the ability to think outside of the box and to solve certain challenges and quests and things that you need to deal with in your life is greatly amplified by your ability to not only trust within yourself, but to also have certain resources internally for you that you can rely on, that you can fall back on. All right. So think about these things. This is kind of the catching up to where we are today conversation. Now, if we look at the transits at the moment, there we have something that's really interesting. Okay, let's do this over here. Okay, we've got South Node 17 degrees conjunct Jupiter in Aries. Okay, so Chiron at 16 degrees, South Node 17, and then we also have this Jupiter. It's not a conjunction, by the way. Jupiter conjunct Chiron, but Jupiter within that spectrum of Chiron. Okay, so what does that aspect mean? Why am I highlighting it? I think it's pretty significant, because the relationship between Aries and Scorpio is one where in our human experience, we have a dual nature, a dual desire, which is to reinforce something that we feel secure within. And then there's also desire to break out of that which we feel comfortable within. And that aspect is seen through Scorpio and Aries. And that Chiron right now, collectively, is showing us that in order to heal, in order to shift your paradigm, in order to move forward in something, each and every one of us has to challenge a pre-existing conditioning within us and to ask ourselves the question, is this still empowering to me? Is this still valuable to me? Is this still meaningful to me? And then the Aries Chiron says, if it's no, free yourself from it. Yeah? Okay. So we're in this kind of push and pull tug of war theme that is consistently kept on being emphasized by this aspect here. Sun at 24 degrees Leo, Saturn in Aquarius there. So this opposition between Saturn and the Sun. And then, of course, there is a natural yod that's taking place today also with Neptune at 24 degrees and Pluto at 26 degrees. So again, the archetypal landscape here is a challenge where we are, again, shifting through certain values, certain belief structures, certain attachments that we have. And the question is, are you alive here, right? This is the Leo component. The Leo component is the question is, are we alive? Or do you feel that you are in a creative mode? right? I mean, this is a very simplistic expression of it, but are you in a creative mode? Are you self-expressing? Are you finding meaning in things? And if the answer is no, then question what is holding you back with the South Node in Scorpio. What is holding you back? Okay, so we've got Sun square Mars, dynamic tension between who and what is giving me value and creative expression. The inconjuncts, as in these aspects here, all the way to Neptune and Pluto, is how we are challenging our collective beliefs and ideals and perspectives, right? So there's this internal relationship between pre-existing ideas about what we think the world is and the part of us that is trying to access the creative expression of who we are, right? Our individualness. And where do you repress it? Where do you hide it? Where do you not let it shine, as an example? Okay. So again, just kind of coming back to more of a summary here with the astrology at the moment, the dynamic tension between holding on to something that feels familiar versus freeing yourself from it, Chiron, South Node. The Sun opposed Saturn creates the complex between the desire for creativity and expression, but the feeling of maybe limitation. And then the inconjuncts between the Sun, Pluto, Neptune says, hey, consider that internally with you, you may still hold certain values, certain ideals, certain perspectives that hold you back from this, and you want to examine that. Hence the Mercury in Virgo, right? Opposed to Neptune, kind of trying to examine what those internal structures are about and if they support you or not. Okay. All right, so that is my thought process around the current astrology at the moment. I really hope that it was fairly okay to follow. There was quite a lot of content, I feel, that comes through that space over there. And of course, you can always go back and watch it, rewatch it. You always are able to write in the comments like, hey, what does this mean over here? Or could you clarify that? Like, I'm happy to help with that as well, okay? Share with me your experience of this current new and full moon that just went through. What shifted for you with Mars and Uranus and North Node conjunction? I want to hear it, okay? All right, so it's good to be back. I hope that everybody had a fairly okay last 2 months. I know there's been, like I said, a lot of changes that have been taking place, but there always are. That seems to be the case. And what else did I want to say? That's pretty much it. As a bonus for being so patient in terms of probably waiting for some videos, if you go to the channel now, you'll actually see that there's another video live, and a lot of people have been waiting for it. I'm really excited to do it. I finally got time to actually sit down and do it. So excited for that. Enjoy that video. And until the next time, my friends, thank you so much for sticking around, for subscribing to Raising Vibrations as always. If you're new to the channel, if somebody shared this video to you, as always, subscribe. Tell YouTube that this video was valuable to you by hitting the like button. And as always, share it with those that you think are going to be finding value in this process. All right? Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.